So we've started another war of regime change in the Middle East. On Saturday, the United States and Israel launched a joint attack on Iran. The supreme leader is dead. Iran is firing retaliatory missiles at U.S. military bases across the Gulf. And Americans in uniform are in harm's way right now, and 4 of them have died. I have something to say about all this, and not as a Democrat, but as a retired Marine who led an infantry unit in Iraq in 2003, the last time a president used the phrase immediate threat to justify sending us to war in the Middle East. We know what came next, so let's talk about what might come next this time. Before I say anything else, I want to address something directly. Someone is going to say, you're just a Democrat playing politics with a military operation. I've heard that before. I'll hear it again. So let me be precise about what politicizing the military actually looks like. This past week, the same week we were bombing Tehran, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered the Pentagon to cut ties with Princeton, Columbia, MIT, Brown, Yale, and other universities. He called them woke breeding grounds of toxic indoctrination. This is a man who holds degrees from Princeton and Harvard. He never defined woke. He never showed evidence that officers at these schools were compromised or influenced in any way. He just posted a video on X and called it policy. And that is politicizing the military. Asking whether Congress should have voted on a decision to go to war, that's the law. Now, Iran's theocratic regime has been a bad actor in the Middle East for a long time. They've armed Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They've supported proxy groups that have killed Americans and Israelis and their Arab neighbors. I wrote a newsletter titled Reading Lolita in Bismarck, in which I mentioned some of the abuses that followed Iran's Islamic Revolution. The executions, the repression, what that regime did to its own people. Those people have suffered under this regime, and they deserve a future that isn't shaped by decisions made without them in Washington, D.C., or Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem. Acknowledging that Iran's regime was bad is not the same thing as saying this war was wise or good. So here's a piece of history that matters right now. In 1953, the United States, working with Britain, overthrew Iran's democratically elected prime minister. We installed the Shah, and we called it stability. What we got was the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the hostage crisis, and the regime we just spent 47 years confronting, the one we bombed this weekend. We created this enemy. Our own intervention generations ago planted the seeds of the crisis we're still trying to end. That does not excuse anything the Iranian regime has done, but it should make every American ask a hard question. When we act unilaterally, without debate, without democratic deliberation, what are we planting for the next generation to deal with? Now, President Trump said this operation would eliminate threats from the Iranian regime. Benjamin Netanyahu called it removing an existential threat. We've heard that language before. In 2002 and 2003, the Bush administration told us Saddam Hussein was an imminent threat. He had weapons of mass destruction. He had connections to terrorism. Congress was given intelligence it couldn't fully understand, and a political atmosphere that made dissent feel like disloyalty. I went. I led Marines. I did my job. And then we found out the intelligence was wrong. The imminent threat wasn't what they said it was. And we spent the next 20 years and trillions of dollars and thousands of lives dealing with the consequences. Now, I want to be fair. Iran is not Iraq. Iran actually had a nuclear program. Iran actually armed troops that killed Americans. But this pattern of bypassing Congress, this urgency that forecloses debate, the confidence that this time will be different, that this time will be clean, Well, that pattern should alarm every American, regardless of party. And let's look at the optics of this situation. The United States has now conducted major military operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran. 3 countries, geographically contiguous, all Muslim majority. I'm not saying those operations are equivalent. I'm not saying they were all equally unjustified. I'm saying look at a map and then imagine you live in that region. Imagine what that pattern looks like from the outside. We wonder why the next generation of recruits keeps showing up for proxy forces across the Middle East. We wonder why our allies hedge. We wonder why neutral mediators like Oman, who just helped broker nuclear talks between the US and Iran, are now publicly warning us not to get further sucked in. That's not anti-American. That's cause and effect. And a serious foreign policy has to reckon with it. Now, here's what I believe. The planning for this operation happened over months. A date was set weeks in advance. The largest U.S. military buildup in the Middle East since 2003 has been underway. There was time, plenty of it, for Congress to debate, to authorize, to represent the American people in a decision that is sending Americans into harm's way. But that process was skipped. The War Powers Resolution exists for a reason. Congress's authority to declare war exists for a reason. These aren't technicalities. They're the way a democracy decides to go to war. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe this president has the right to protect American lives. I also believe that a democracy that goes to war without its legislature has handed one of its most consequential decisions to a single executive. I don't know how this ends. I hope the Iranian people, who were already in the streets demanding change before the first bomb fell, I hope they find their way to a future that reflects their dignity. I hope every American service member in the Gulf right now comes home safely. For at least 4 of them, it's too late for that. I hope we are willing to learn from the last time we were here. What I know is this: a candidate who won't say the hard things when they need to be said isn't much of a candidate. And a democracy that stops asking hard questions of its leaders isn't much of a democracy. I'm Trygve Hammer. I'm running for Congress in North Dakota, and I believe the people of this state deserve a representative who will see something and say something, even when it's complicated or unpopular.